All right. Well, welcome. My name is Karen Sig. I am the Executive Director with Recycling Connections, and welcome to the Rechargeable Battery Management Challenges in Wisconsin webinar. And this webinar, because of this topic being so important to all of the solid waste industry, it is sponsored by Associated Recyclers of Wisconsin, the SWANA, the Solid Waste Association of North America, and the Badger chapter, and the Wisconsin County Solid Waste Management Association, and Recycling Connections. And so we thank all the folks sponsoring this and feel like this is really going to be very informative and beginning of some of our efforts to educate more folks about these particular kinds of batteries and these challenges. So thank you for joining us. And our speaker today is Chris Blahn from the Resource Recovery Technician for Brown County Port and Solid Waste. And I have one more little background. I am really involved with this as wearing my hat as a member of the Wisconsin's Waste Materials Management Study Group. And I serve on that wearing my Recycling Connections hat, but also representing the Associated Recyclers of Wisconsin. And on that particular study group, I also chair the Recovery and Diversion Committee, which Chris is also a member of. And we've been talking about this topic over the last maybe year or so. And if anything, it's only gotten more important to be discussing and learning more about. So with all that context, I am going to then turn this over to Chris, and I will mute myself and stop my video. All right, Chris.
Thank you, Karen. All the pictures and information, the pictures and case studies, I try to keep to the state of Wisconsin's specific, all the examples. I also tried to do something a little different. They're not different, but they're different. It's new to me. Throughout the presentation, there'll be QR codes. If you take your, I think this is, I'm not sure if it's iPhone only, but if you take your phone and you and your camera, it'll bring you to a sighting that I may have, or for more information, or if there's a graph, where I got the graph from. So I thought it'd be this extra little tool that if you want more information on a topic, you can just take your iPhone and you take your camera, and it'll bring you to a website with to provide some more information on that topic. So these challenges for rechargeable batteries in the waste management industry. Are these a short-lived problem? Is it something worth discussing? And every graph you look out there, looking for different information on that, you will find a very similar graph like this, where almost every 5 years the demand for lithium battery, now we say rechargeable batteries, it's NiCads, nickel metal hydrides, but more specifically and importantly, it's regarding, when we say rechargeable batteries, it's referring to the lithium ion and lithium metal type batteries. So as you can see, for the consumer, this graph shows two sets of information. And for me, for the consumer electronics and the batteries that power those devices, the green, you can see that it is not getting any smaller. If anything, it's incrementally increasing, and that's what this presentation discusses, these types of wastes. But these graphs that you'll see here also, it shows another potential issue for the waste management industry, and that's the electric vehicle batteries. The demand and the use of these batteries are going to greatly exponentially increase. who is going to manage that waste stream? Is it going to be solid waste departments similar to lead acid batteries, or is it going to be that industry, the automotive industry themselves, who will manage that waste stream? So, so that in time that will determine that question. Those batteries tend to last 10 years. The electrical vehicle batteries, so probably right around 2025 is when you begin to see a big the dripping of those batteries become an issue before it becomes a full stream problem. So looking at the lowest hanging fruit of what issues rechargeable batteries have is that, as we all know, they are ignition sources. So on the side here is a picture of a battery that we had. It's a lithium polymer battery. The battery caught fire. One of the cells caught fire, and as we tried to manage that, move around that battery, additional cells also caught fire within the battery. But as we know, batteries are ignition sources, and depending upon the chemistry of the lithium ion battery, it has a varied thermal runaway temperature, and those temperatures are right around the ignition point of paper, which then you can see how rechargeable batteries, specifically lithium batteries, have the ability to just become high-tech matches. So this is actually two different issues to combine them both. The first one is the regulation versus education. And what I mean by that is over a decade plus, over the years, waste management departments have tried to educate the public that to keep batteries and rechargeable batteries out of your recycling and out of your trash. So there's been efforts for educating the public on that. However, state statute allows allows residents and homes to allow them to put batteries in the trash. There's nothing that prevents them. So the efforts of the industry, in essence, kind of contrast or kind of conflicts of what is permitted to what is allowed, what the public is allowed to do. So we educate the public not to put them in your trash, not to put them in the recycling bin, curbside bin. So where do these wastes that fall outside the bin, where can they go? And that's an additional problem. There are entities out there like Call to Recycle, which is a great program for the recycling of batteries. But every single outlet has problems. They tend to work with only institutions, and they do not accept vaping devices, the batteries of vaping devices, if the battery is still connected to the device. You have certain special recycling programs, some recycling programs, and some specialty businesses will accept batteries for recycling, but they tend to be in either higher populated areas, they're not widely available, and neither of them tend to be aware of the changing DOT rules. And most commonly is where people tell where the public is told is to bring batteries and all hazardous waste or different hard to manage wastes to the to HHW programs. The problem with that as an disposal outlet is there's only a handful of permanent programs. Some of them might be seasonal, some of them might have event collections once or twice a year. In some areas, there is no HHW programs available to them. When it comes to the cost of managing batteries, those that have the clean sweep grants, the disposal of those batteries cannot be paid for by clean sweep grants. because they are a recyclable product. Nor are vaping devices that have those rechargeable batteries. They are not able to be paid for with pharmaceutical grants, as vaping devices are not considered a nicotine replacement therapy. So that means they are not a prescribed pharmaceutical, and those grants are only available to prescription medications and not what these are considered pharmaceuticals by the pharmaceutical rules that were implemented last September. So another issue that the solid waste world is having is that the studies that are out there are not providing a full picture. The most recent study is the EPA study back in July. The approach with them is that they scoured the internet, looked for news articles that had batteries that had battery fires, and they interviewed those locations, and they categorized the impacts of those batteries. The background picture here is an actual picture of a Wisconsin landfill managing a battery fire. This is towards the end of that. So the study had a bunch of facilities that were affected, ones that we would naturally recognize as groups that would have these issues: landfills, MRFs, rail trucks, battery recyclers, obviously, waste incinerators. But I highlighted a few ones that you probably wouldn't recognize or wouldn't think of: pharmaceutical drop-offs, when the people dispose of vaping devices, and those devices are initiated within the drop box. They heat up and they have caused fires at pharmaceutical drop boxes. And even libraries. Some libraries have battery drop boxes that have had fires. Those can be found in that EPA study. And those of you that deal with electronic recyclers, over the last couple of years, they've had pushed to have their customers sort out devices that are powered by rechargeable batteries, to have them sorted out and separated out due to the fires that they've been having in their facilities. Those electronics go through shredders. So basically, what these studies they show you is that batteries basically become a problem. Rechargeable batteries become a problem immediately as soon as the battery is discarded. Once you discard the battery, the risk of fire or something happening begins. So looking at that EPA study, they have 4 Wisconsin case studies in that report, and here's where the problem is. Anecdotally, if you talk to different landfills, I've talked to a couple landfills, they have had fires on a weekly or every 1 to 3 weeks. If you look at this report, you get an idea of the breadth and the scope of the problem, but you don't get an idea of the frequency of the problem. And that's where the shortcomings of these reports are. You cannot determine what frequency or how bad the problem is, except for one case study that they have in the EPA report. If you look at the description, Pacific Northwest landfill, that is not the name of the landfill. That is more of a geographic description, and that's for a good reason. They kept track of all the different fires that they had at their landfill over a 3.5 year time period, and they're averaging a fire every week and a half. So this case study is more akin to anecdotal evidence of talking to people in the waste industry, that it is more frequent of a problem than what these studies will show. And the reason for that comes into the footnote of that study. And there is a impression that if you have a fire at your facility, the public automatically thinks that is because your facility is improperly ran. So because of this, it is hard for these studies to get an idea of the frequency of the problem. It's great for the breadth and the scope of the problem, but does not provide any insight on how bad the problem is. So keeping up with DOT regulations, here's a question to go into here, before we go to the next slide is, what do batteries and, let's say, shock sensitive explosives have in common? Well, in how they present themselves, both are actually banned to be transported on public roadways. Batteries are considered a electrical device, and electrical devices such as batteries and battery-powered devices are banned from being transported on public roadways unless they're packaged in a manner that prevents any dangerous generation of heat or prevents them from causing sparks. This is the premise of the requirement that terminals must be taped, or batteries must be bagged up in a bag. This is the premise of why that needs to happen, is to prevent that occurrence from happening in order to be able to transport batteries via roadway. So if you have batteries that you are looking, if you collect batteries at your facility, this is what all needs to go into if you're collecting them. Start all with the universal waste rules, the state universal waste rules. The QR code will bring you to the NR 673, where batteries need to be stored in a compatible container. Be labeled with the words universal waste. Have the words used batteries, and also be dated have the accumulation start date on them. And all batteries have to be prepared to be transported. To protect, the previous slide says to protect them. The DOT regulations also tell you how those need to be protected. So the terminals have to be rechargeable batteries, and alkaline batteries over 9 volts need to be covered or somehow protected so that the terminals don't meet, or they do not short out. Batteries need to be sorted. It could be your contractor's requirement. It also is a requirement for the DOT. In order to have the proper shipping name of that material to be transported on the roadway. The 1729101 is the table for that. And they actually have shipping names for the alkaline and nickel metal hydride and nickel cadmium batteries of batteries dry sealed. The NOS means not otherwise specified. So if it's not otherwise specified in the name, you have to give an example of what that battery is, if it's alkaline batteries or if it's a NiCad batteries. And there's proper shipping names also for lithium batteries, either lithium metal batteries or lithium ion batteries. So the previous slide, and along with this requirement in right here, is why batteries need to be sorted, and the terminals need to be taped on rechargeable batteries and the batteries over 9 volts. Recently, probably within the last 4 years or so, the DOT has created rules explicitly for lithium batteries, either lithium metal or lithium ion batteries. So the bare minimum is this universal waste label. If you have the dry batteries and as a waste, non-hazardous waste, those need to be used. And if you have lithium batteries, there's additional markings. These are not considered labels, but they're considered markings. Need to be put on the container. And then there's restrictions for the size of the battery that recycling exemptions apply to. The maximum amount of size of a lithium metal battery can be up to 25 grams. Lithium ion batteries, there's a max of 300 watt hours per battery. The exemptions for transportation apply to batteries under those size levels. You can use any packaging as long as it's sturdy and withstands a 1.2 meter drop test. These markings are required. 3090 for lithium metal batteries, 3480 for lithium ion batteries. You do need to supply a number of a facility that has information on about that package. It is not the manifest Chemtrack type of number where it's a 24/7. Someone needs to be able to answer that phone 24/7. But a number is required to if there's any issues about that package that's being transported. There's also a gross weight restriction for lithium batteries. The whole package, the pail, the container, and along with the contents of it cannot exceed 66 pounds. There are rules for devices that are powered by lithium batteries, and those there is no weight restrictions for packaging when it comes to devices. So if your facility is collecting and transporting batteries to a contractor, that means you are transporting hazardous materials, which means then there are educational requirements for those employees who are involved with that work. There's 3 general categories where those employees would fall, or training requirements, general awareness, function specific, which is the big one if you're selecting the packaging, if you're labeling up the container, if you're preparing the materials to be transported, which would mean taping terminals. There is a required training that needs to be provided to those employees upon employment and every 3 years thereafter. Here below are additional links to that information regarding what is required for training. On the right here is information that we provide our employees to provide some of that education, and what we require, what is required to be how a container needs to be packaged for transportation. Disregard the number 6. That's an internal. That's exclusive to our facility. And this is just more additional information on what we provide our employees, of what a lithium ion battery is, what keywords to look for. 18650 batteries are just a measurement. The diameter is 18 millimeters and the length of it is 65. A lot of the lithium ion, like AA size, AAA size, will have this indication as just lithium cobalt. It's just a indicator of what the chemistry of that lithium battery is. Again, you have to look for the watt hours. These exemptions for recycling only apply to lithium ions that are under 300 watt hours. Every battery since 2015 will have that listed on the battery. The one on top by the arrow has it listed at 3.55 watt hours. The one in the middle, you can always do it's volts times watts times amp hours. 2000 milliamp hours. If you have the prefixes of decicenti-milli, 3 decimal places to the left, 2 amp hours times 3.7 volts. This is a 7.4 watt hour battery. Now, their issues are arising where we have batteries that are above 300 watt hours, the maximum to allow for the exemptions for transporting for recycling. And we'll get to those soon. So the advancements in battery technology are in use are causing they're causing additional issues right now. So that same Eagle battery with that 420 watt hour rating, that surpasses the 300 watt hours, which means then there's less exemptions and more regulations. There are many recyclers that are having requested interpretation from the DOT on what that requirement means. At the bare minimum, each battery would need to be put in a inside container, and that container would need inner packaging, and that inner packaging would need to be would need an outer packaging to be able to transport it. The question is that does that inner packaging and outer packaging need to be UN rated? So there is some questions out there. These batteries are being sold right now. I don't know if they're coming into any waste facilities yet, but they will be coming. The other issue is the increased use of lithium batteries in sealed devices, either wired into a device, or even this is a picture of a water meter where the batteries are sealed in with a resin. You have two issues with here is if you treat them as an electronic into a program and collect them with your electronics, there will be a time in the near future where those packaging requirements that are for batteries, those same packaging requirements also apply to devices that are powered by lithium batteries. So there may be additional sorting and packaging restrictions when it comes to sending these devices to your electronics recycler. These are not banned from the landfill. So if you choose not to collect them in your eCycle Wisconsin program, then most likely these devices will end up in your landfill, where now they will become a risk. They are currently at a risk so much that landfills are changing how they operate. Many landfills will keep a pile of clay near their active area, with the inevitable occasion that a landfill fire occurs due to these rechargeable batteries. So a little open-ended question here. If rechargeable batteries are required certain criteria to be transported on roadways, should those same and be considered hazardous material, should those same batteries, that same material, be allowed to be landfilled? That's just an open-ended question. I'll leave there. So the next issue is not quite an issue, but it's very related to batteries, and especially lithium batteries, regarding the mineral scarcity and national security issues. There are three countries that produce about 90% of all the lithium in the world: China, Chile, and Australia. And the other countries make up the rest. So right now, the supply of lithium is currently outpacing the demand. But with that exponential curve that we saw previously, that will shortly flip in the near future, where the demand will now outweigh the supply. And if the U.S. is not, if it is currently importing 50% of all their lithium, will that be an issue? Will the U.S. be able to find enough lithium for domestic uses once that demand surpasses the supply? In 2018, there was a study by the U.S. Geological Service of the 35 minerals that are critical to U.S. national security, and lithium made that list due to 50% of the lithium that the country uses is imported. So in that study, basically says that the U.S. import, and this is 2018, so it's already outdated. The U.S. import reliance on lithium is moderate, but increasing foreign consumption, in addition to U.S. demand growth, has driven a substantial exploration boom. There is one source of major source of lithium in the U.S., and that's in Utah. I believe it's called like Valley Creek. And then that eventual demand, once this demand outweighs supply, we will have, that source as a domestic source of lithium. But like I said, we'll need that exploration boom of where we can find lithium, so more metals, not just lithium, but also cobalt, manganese, and other metals that we need for battery use, and quite possibly that other source could be the lithium batteries that we are currently having, that we're currently throwing away, where we might need to look and push for the recycling of those batteries as a source for domestic lithium. If you read the headlines, there are companies that are popping up and are investing in lithium recycling buildings and manufacturers and or recyclers, that they are investing money into recovering the lithium that are in current products now in the nation. So that is all I have for our presentation here. Yeah, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Chris. And this is Karen. I'm going to, let's open it up at this point, either questions directly for Chris, and also if maybe I'll start with that first. If anyone has any direct question, please, you can unmute yourself and share that. I didn't see anything in the chat, so if anyone, or let's see, well, I'm not seeing anyone immediately. So if anyone has general comments, open to that as far as the information that he shared and or reactions initially. We got a quiet bunch here today. Well, I think, I don't know if maybe just with a poll of, or just on the reactions, how many of you, if you just down on the bottom there, maybe either, raise your hand or give a thumbs up or something, if you found some of this information, very more of a higher level of, oh, wow, than you thought, versus, oh yeah, I already knew this, I just kind of wanted to see what was saying. There's some that said like, oh, wow, this was a lot more than I had thought of. Okay, got one, let's see, 2, 3, okay. Well, thank you, because that's also was part of our goal for this, is to increase awareness of how complicated this is, and the layers of the DOT to state statutes, et cetera. And so that is one of our accomplishment or goals here for this, was to create that, first of all, that awareness. And oh, here we have a question. It's like, how did the Pacific Northwest landfill compile its data on battery fires? If you know that, Chris.
I think the operations manager there just took it upon themselves to have their workers report every time a fire occurred, and what the source of the fire was. And when the EPA interviewed them, they just coincidentally just happened to have that information in front of them. So It is something that the operator just did on their own behalf, just as for tracking purposes.
Sure. Okay. Thanks.
I will throw out there that many people will say that that they will think that the DOT does not apply to government entities. That's not quite true. It does, that there's an exemption for government entities for DOT rules. That is true if it is a government vehicle and it is transported for non-commercial and for that government's benefit. So below are some interpretation letters that long story short, basically say if you hire a third party transporter is hauling your materials, that exemption for government no longer applies. So even though we are many of us are government employees, I have government operations, we are collecting batteries. We are sending those batteries off to our contractor where they're picking them up, not with a government vehicle. It is then considered commercial. So those DOT regulations do now apply. So I think that's a common incorrect thought that many people have, is that because they are government, that they are exempt. If it is not for its own government's benefit, for non-commercial use and operated by the vehicle operated by a government employee, DOT rules do actually apply.
Okay, thanks. Let's see, we have something else, just sharing. What recommendations do you have for educating small municipal drop-off sites about proper storage and packaging of batteries and electronics?
When it comes to the electronics part, I have had in discussions with Brown County's electronic recycler regarding, are they aware of the rules and how they see them applying, being applied. When it comes to electronics with the battery power, with lithium batteries powering them, due to fires in their facilities with shredders, I do see some sort of increased restriction or increased requirement that sites will have in packaging their devices powered by lithium batteries, due to the DOT rules that they need to abide by, since many of them transport their own waste back to their facility, and due to protection of their own facility. When it comes to educating smaller municipalities and communities, if you educate on the risk of it, I think that's all you can do. And then I think it's up to them to decide if those risks are acceptable. They know what they have to do to collect them. I guess just education, what they have to do to safely collect those batteries.
Okay, here's another. Assuming one follows the rules of the box, are shipping call to recycle boxes DOT compliant? Do you know that by chance?
I guess I can't say 100% sure. I would assume they are, because call to recycle is very up on all the rules. What I didn't touch upon is damaged batteries, due to the restrictions of, terminals have to be in tape, or the problem of the short circuiting and evolution of heat. Taping a terminal of a damaged battery will not solve that problem. Call to recycle does have specialty packaging that mitigates that risk, so that you can transport damaged batteries. Those packages, those kits, are expensive. They can be duplicated. If you're familiar with them, they're the same type of packaging as they call PIH boxes, or poison inhalation hazard boxes, for packing group 1 materials. You just need extra markings and extra labels on those packagings. However, going through call to recycle also gives you an outlet for disposal. So even though you can probably recreate those packages cheaper, they do have a DOT special permit allowing them to have batteries transported in that manner. So even though it's an expensive cost, it also provides the disposal alternative. Doesn't quite answer your question, but if they're that involved into the regulations and special permits when it comes to their damaged batteries, I am sure that the boxes that they have, the attention to the detail regarding the regulations, I'm sure they also have looked into that also.
I put something in the chat box that I wanted to share. There's been some comments about the possibility of collecting anonymous information about, let's say, the frequencies and or types, et cetera, of fires at facilities and and or trucks, whichever. And so I put in there, if you just even have a remote interest, not that, commitment, but like would maybe be willing to share. And I'm not even saying who would be collecting this information yet, but just, I'm just trying to curious if some of you would be willing to be, or think that that would be helpful for even yourself, first of all, to collect kind of the information that landfill did in the Pacific Northwest, to get some data for yourself. But if, would any of you be interested in sharing that, over a window of time? And again, we've had we've had some discussions about the pros and cons and our ideas of that, but if you are even remotely have an interest, I'd like to just gather, people's comments, or, because then I could communicate and directly. So my email is in the chat box. That's something, again, I just wanted to share that, we're kind of bouncing around, whether it's Recycling Connections, Arrow, is something else, and we'll kind of see where that goes. Let's see, other questions. Are you aware of companies like Tesla having a recycling or buyback program for the batteries? Could these batteries end up legally in the landfill? Do you know anything about, I know you mentioned a little something about the, especially the potential or the foreseen increase in electrical car batteries, but anyway, there's that question. Are you just aware of any like them, having?
No, I'm not aware of any like take back or any exchange program with a manufacturer or dealer of electrical vehicles. I don't see those types of batteries making their way to the landfill. Well, actually, no, I take that back. Unless there's a landfill ban, residents probably are still able to landfill those. If it's coming through an HHW facility, there is a rule, it's like 661.0004 or something, where residential material is not a hazardous waste, and this would be a hazardous waste due to the characteristics of reactivity, a D003 material, that if material sorted out from the residential waste stream and brought to a facility, regulated under NR 666, subpart HH, which is all HHW programs, then that material has to be treated as a hazardous waste. If it is coming from a business, if it has a commercial electrical vehicle, then they would have to do a waste determination on that waste stream, which they would identify that as a reactive material, characteristic of reactivity, and then they would have to treat that as, I would imagine, treat that as hazardous. So I guess the only way into a landfill for, let's say, an electrical vehicle battery that is lithium based, that would be possible, I guess, possible through a residential outlet. Obviously, they're already banned. There's also already a ban for lead batteries, so I guess that would be a one way in, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of on all of this, looking again from the chat, just summarizing some of this as well. The data, as Sarah Murray from the DNR said, this kind of data would be really helpful to the DNR if they were going to make a case for banning these materials or pushing for something like EPR. And for me, yes, these smaller lithiums, obviously, those are definitely a concern, but I think we're going to have even a bigger elephant to deal with these car batteries. And if we don't get the car manufacturers involved with this, just because of the many of the climate change things are involving getting away from, gas powered vehicles, et cetera, and going to electrical. So, we can foresee, yes, that those, why don't we address this as soon as we can, rather than behind the scenes after the fact. So, yeah, there's an article there in the chat. Thanks. I'll have to check that out and look into that. But yeah, I think if people are willing to share some of this information, I think it's going to be very powerful information to help us all really understand the impacts of these fires, the frequencies, et cetera. So we'll think about, that and how we could, because from our end, at least the resource and recovery subcommittee of the waste study group, part of that was like, well, we've got to start with education and awareness. And then following that, maybe from all these kind of sessions and discussions, we'll see maybe a path for advocacy of a certain next step. So we don't know yet, but what that step would be best, what would be the best one, what, where we should go, could go, et cetera. So we wanted to start, first of all, with this outreach and education about the issue, because realizing that maybe a lot of folks are not, I only see an article once in a while in the paper, so it must not be that bad. And that, with this report here, or presentation too, learning how complicated and, maybe worse that it is. Let's see, Sarah, there's funding in the new federal infrastructure bill for battery education and recycling. So we'll be watching to see the details of those grant programs. Yes, that's exciting news. Yes, definitely. So, yeah, any other kinds of questions, comments as well? We still have, some 10 minutes, and really, again, appreciate people's already what you've been sharing, and thanks to the DNR folks for being on and providing some, again, constructive or helpful information for the others in the industry to kind of see where we're communicating with each other. Anything else anybody wants to share? Okay. Well, I want to, before folks leave, I really do, again, want to thank there are, costs to producing these and webinars, and to be able to show them and put them on, not a lot, but there's just some, with posting on the YouTube. We'll be sharing these later, and really want to thank the collaborative efforts that Arrow, Swana-Badger chapter, and Wickswama have always been doing, especially like with the upcoming Wisconsin Integrated Resource Management Conference in February in Green Bay. And so wanting to thank them, again, Recycling Connections as a nonprofit, we are funded through contracts, but we always are doing also projects that are not directly funded and as part of our mission. And so this is one of my activities, is to be working on this study group, for example, and stepping forward and representing Arrow that way. So this way, this particular webinar was a real collaboration. Thank you to all that participated and for helping fund this. Thank you so much for Chris and your presentation and your information, your experiences, because it really is, again, a wealth of knowledge and really does help us understand, what, all that detail behind the scenes of how, and then how complicated this can get. So you're, again, welcome to put another question in on that, but before folks start leaving, I wanted to thank, again, all the folks involved with putting this one together. And as a participant, I will email you all to where you can see the link, and that you can share further with others that weren't able to attend. Again, we wanted to make this available to all that were interested and not just Arrow members. So again, then I think with that, we'll just kind of end this out, and thank you again.